Cool. I think we're live and all set to go. Welcome back for another NFL live stream. This time we've got our week 10 picks. We're going to go over the injuries. We're going to go position by position through my favorite plays on the slate, through my favorite stacks. If you guys have any questions, of course, go ahead and put them down in the chat. I'll get to them whenever I see them. And overall, let's make some lineups together. So without any delay at all, let's hop right into the quarterbacks for the slate. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for you guys. And you guys can see we have our Patreon projections on the screen. So obviously, if you're looking for direct access, you guys know where to get that. It is on my Patreon page, just $8 for the month. You get access to all of these projections. But with that out of the way, let's talk about these quarterbacks. And I'm not going to talk about every player on the slate. I'm going to try and make this more of an abbreviated live stream. I'm going to try and be a little bit more concise here. So just going to talk about our core plays. So first and foremost, Tom Brady, I think, is in a great spot against this Washington football team. Not only has Washington been a lot worse on defense this year than we've seen over the past few years, they've also been better on offense. So overall, we've seen some shootouts between the games that they've had. So Tom Brady at $7,600, I think he's a really solid option. But even more so, a lot of it comes down to receiving options that we have that we can use in a stack. We're going to be dealing with Antonio Brown not playing, Rob Gronkowski out as well. So we're really looking at Mike Evans, Chris Godwin as the main targets for this team, potentially a Tyler Johnson, Cameron Brate, and OJ Howard. Overall, you're looking at a concentrated offense, and I have it projected really highly in terms of playing him on himself, in terms of Tom Brady, or playing that Buccaneers stack. A few other guys that I really like here, Aaron Rodgers at $7,100 playing against the Seahawks team. I think it's a good bounce back spot. A lot of people are going to be hesitant to go to him just because of the COVID issues. Obviously, hasn't practiced with the team. But honestly, with Aaron Rodgers, I'm not worried about that. This is a world-class athlete, somebody who's one of the best minds in all of football. So if anybody's going to be able to adjust quickly, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. And you can see it's obviously a plus matchup against the Seahawks defense. Also a relatively high over-under. So I like targeting him. He's not my favorite target on the slate. But again, he's only 3.9% owned. So you're looking at getting some easy leverage on somebody like him. And I definitely think it's well warranted. Next up, we've got Dak Prescott at $6,900. Somebody who projects well, obviously had a dud week last week. I was somebody who thought he'd return well from injury. Obviously, that wasn't the case. But I went back, I watched the game. They had a replay on the NFL channel, and it wasn't the hamstring, the calf. It wasn't the injury that was holding him back. It was just an inefficiency from the offense, which is actually a little bit more encouraging. I'd much rather see the scheme be the problem rather than the health. Obviously, with a week of practice, I expect them to have that ironed out, and that's why I'll be playing him there. You can see he's going to be relatively popular, but one of the chalky options at quarterback, actually the chalkiest option on the slate, but I'm willing to eat that type of ownership. Next up, we have Kirk Cousins, and overall, this Vikings-Chargers game, I expect it to be an absolute shootout. You're dealing with two high-scoring teams, two defenses that aren't shy at letting up a lot of points. So I like going to him in stacks. You can see he's relatively cheap as well. So up here, I have Justin Herbert, as a blank right now. I'm not sure whether he's going to end up making my player pool. Wouldn't be against that at all. Against this high-scoring game. The thing with Kirk Cousins, he's a little bit cheaper. Right? He's only $6,100 as opposed for $7,300 for Herbert. Let's talk about a few of the other guys further down the board. A lot of these mid-tier options, I'm just not really sold on, whether it's over-under, whether it's injury situations or matchup. None of them are really popping off the board. Somebody to consider in one-offs would be Trevor Lawrence, though. He's got rushing upside. Obviously, this team's been a little bit more productive than people have given them credit for. So I don't think going there at all either. PJ Walker and Mason Rudolph. Let's get to these two value tier options, though, because you're going to hear a lot of things about Mason Rudolph today. Obviously, $4,100. Decent matchup against the Lions. Unfortunately, there's a weather situation in Pittsburgh. It's going to be sleeting and snowing all day. Whether that affects Mason Rudolph, I guess we'll have to see. But overall, at $4,100, it's hard not to like him. You can see I have him projected for 17.1 points. That is still considering the fact that we're going to have this bad weather. So for me, I'm still going to be playing him. You can obviously match him up with a Deontay Johnson. We're not going to have any Juju Smith-Schuster. Unfortunately, out for the year, repping my guy here as a Steeler fan, but I'm not going to have Chase Claypool either, and also not going to have, actually, I believe that's it for injuries, but that leaves us with Deontay Johnson, James Washington, Pat Freiermuth, and Eric Ebron. So essentially 4 wide receivers. You're going to have McLeod mixed in from time to time, but you're dealing with a concentrated offense. That's why I like using him as a stacking option. It's definitely going to be low owned and potentially high points per dollar. So it depends on who you're able to spend up for using a Mason Rudolph. I don't think you should be trying to force him in as value. You might not need it. right? If you like some of the mid-tier options at running back and wide receiver, it's very likely you don't need that extra $2,000 at quarterback. So it makes more sense to go one of these stud options like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, that kind of thing. But if you need the salary, if there's a couple really solid running backs that you want to spend up for, I definitely think he's the way to go ahead and do so. What we'll do next is we'll hop into our running backs. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for you guys. Gee, I need to bring it up on my end first. Here we go. Fantastic. All right, so we got our running backs up here now. So bunch of running backs on the slate, bunch of injury situations. So there's going to be some value spots, particularly at this position that we can target. As a result, ownership is very concentrated. You're dealing with a lot of chalk options. So overall, really want to make sure that we're targeting and picking our spots here. We can't really spread our ownership here just because it's so chalky. And a lot of the chalky options are good plays on the slate. So they're not going to be people I'm avoiding. There are a couple chalky options like Jonathan Taylor I'm avoiding though. 16.1% ownership. Anytime somebody gets that highly owned, it's usually a fade unless it's an absolute smash spot. And it's a good matchup here. Obviously, he's a little bit expensive as well. So for me, it's a fade just with all of that in mind. Down here, Austin Eckler, also a little bit of an interesting situation. I mean, he's not as overpriced as somebody like a Jonathan Taylor, has been prolific to this point of the year. The issue is the ownership, 17.1% ownership. That is just well too high. The matchup is good. We know that, but we're going to have to make the decision on Eckler going into it. As of right now, I have Taylor down as a fade, Eckler kind of up in the air. I like Justin Herbert on the slate. I also have Herbert down as a blank. So if I end up playing Justin Herbert, very likely that I get to some of these stacks with Eckler just because he's so high in terms of his PPR production, but we'll have to see. Guys that I know I'm playing no matter what, though, let's hop into the core plays. First and foremost, going to be Christian McCaffrey there at $8,400. Obviously, didn't get a ton of usage last week. It was his first week back from injury. But when this guy gets back to his normal workload, he's going to be a must play, particularly at $8,400. We're not going to see him price that low for the rest of the year. So I'm willing to buy in a little bit early on him. Najee Harris is in a great matchup with this Lions team. We know it's going to be sleeting. We know it's going to be snowing up there in Pittsburgh. So what better than to target these running backs? We know they're going to get some extra touches. And this Lions defense has been atrocious against the run. So even though the Steelers haven't been the best on the ground, I like going there, even if he's a little bit higher owned for my liking. Ezekiel Elliott, also relatively chalky. So you can see, this top end range, tons of ownership. And just because we have those value tier options, essentially in every lineup, somebody's taking a stud tier option at running back and then taking a value play, which I don't think that's a bad strategy at all. You just got to keep that in mind when you're building. If you're using that type of setup, using that type of construction, you're more than likely going to be duped. So keep that in mind. You need to take somebody that's a little bit more unique to balance that out. But Ezekiel Elliott, I like the matchup against the Falcons. The Falcons have been atrocious against opposing offenses. The Cowboys are in a great bounce back spot here. They need to go out there, win a game, that kind of thing. So I like Ezekiel Elliott in this situation. Aaron Jones, a good go-to. I'm just not fitting him in my pool as of right now. I'm trying to prioritize somebody like Elliott, Harris, or McCaffrey. But if he ends up squeezing into my pool later on, not going to hold that against him. Same thing with the Cordell Patterson. Leonard Fournette, love the matchup against that Washington football team. So if Tom Brady's not the one to go out there and get you a massive performance, perhaps just Leonard Fournette. Antonio Gibson, other side of that matchup, you can go there. It's going to be a shootout. Adrian Peterson, farly under-owned. This guy should be much higher owned than he is. He's only $4,900. He scored a touchdown last week. And while he didn't look great, he looked a little bit rusty. That was his first week back. He had only practiced for a few days. Now that he's getting more reps under him, he's going to be able to watch that tape. Really, he was just running too high. He kept hearing the guys during prime time talking about that. He wasn't getting any of that push that we were used to seeing until the end of the game where he kind of corrected that. So I expect him to go out there, get you a touchdown, that kind of thing against the Saints defense. Saints defense is very banged up. This isn't a high scoring game or anything like that, but Adrian Peterson's cheap enough to at least get by. Options I like a hell lot more, though. He's more of a flyer play. He's only 0.6% owned. So we're talking about allocating 1 to 2 of our lineups to Adrian Peterson. But Dearness Johnson, boy, is he going to be chalky. You can see we have him projected right now. Sorry, these two were mixed up for some reason. I don't know why that's the case. He's rated for 19.2% ownership, not 3.2. Type all of a sudden. Let's fix that. So he's rated for 19.2% ownership, which is a ton of ownership, but that's well warranted. I mean, this guy's the only running back they have active on this Browns team. Hunt's on IR. You have Chubb with COVID. Felton has COVID. And I believe they had no other active running backs. They weren't even able to bring one up from their practice squad, given all this happened so last second. So DeAndre Johnson at $4,700. He obviously played well the first time he got a start for this team. Last week, Nick Chubb went off when he returned and whatnot. But now that Johnson has the reins here again, I expect another huge game. He's not lock material. In cash games, by all means, he's lock material. You want to make sure you have him in every cash lineup that you run. And GPPs with that type of ownership, I'm probably running him about 40-50% of my lineups. That's still going to be, not a ton of leverage. In order to get true leverage on somebody like a Johnson, you almost have to lock him. But I'm not going to let that make or break my slate today. There's definitely a circumstance out there where Bill Belichick just decides to stop the run, decides to let them pass the ball all they want, and Johnson would get screwed in that type of circumstance. So I still like him. I don't think that's going to be the case. I want to be extremely clear about that. But Bill Belichick is one of the few coaches in the NFL where if he decides to take away a part of your game, he's taking that part of the game away. Sure, he might open himself up elsewhere, but he's more than willing to do so. We've seen it against star players in the past, particularly in the playoffs. Again, this isn't a playoff game or anything like that. It's not like this guy is going to be bringing all the tricks out, but it's a game they need to win this division. That Patriots team, believe it or not, is in the hunt to win the AFC East, especially because of how the Bills have looked of late, especially with last week's loss. They need to go out there and win. So you're going to see their best foot forward. So just keep that in mind. I'm a little bit worried about that situation. The more and more I talk about, the more and more I think it's a potential trap spot. But we'll see coming up to lot. Obviously in Patreon, I'll go ahead and let you guys know. As of right now, he's one of my favorite plays on the slate. Mark Ingram, if I was going to pivot, and this is why I think that there's a legitimate argument here, is Mark Ingram projects almost as well, right? He's going to be starting for the Saints team. We have Alvin Kamara out. We also have their backups out. He's the only active running back on the roster. So much like somebody like a Dearness Johnson, going to be getting all the touches out of the backfield. Now, the caveat with Mark Ingram is that he has the Taysom Hill situation that could happen, right? They can get down to the red zone. Taysom Hill could be running zone reads. They've already said that they're going to be doing that this week from Sean Payne. So there's concerns with both of these running backs. I don't think either of them is a complete lock here. Obviously, Johnson projects a little bit higher just due to the O-line efficiency, also due to the matchup. Coming in with lower ownership, though. So you can see he's coming in 0.8% owned. I don't know what happened with my formatting here. I think I slightly got this off because he's supposed to be 14.3% owned. So yeah, sorry, Patreon guys, I will get back to fixing that as soon as we get off the stream here in like 20 minutes. My ownership is, I think it's only for the running back. I checked all the other ones. Running back was actually the last position I uploaded here. It looks like the formatting's off with the ownership. The lines are like 2 or 3 lines off. This one was a little bit too high. This one was a little bit too high. I'll get back fixing that in a little bit. Anyways, though, Mark Ingram, 14.3% ownership, a little bit lower owned than somebody like a Dearness Johnson, right? So we'll see. As of right now, I'm playing both of them. I see problems with both of their games, though. There's definitely circumstances where they failed today. So if you're feeling extremely bold, you want to go ahead and fade both of them. I guess you could do it. They're the best point per dollar plays on the slate at the position. So I don't necessarily think that's a great idea, but I could see it. Again, there are circumstances where they fail. I just won't be fading them. DG Dallas, if we're going to go to a complete flyer down here, if the Packers end up getting ahead by a bunch of points, DG Dallas will be the head running back. You're dealing with Chris Carson, who's on IR. You have Alex Collins, who still has that lingering injury. He doesn't have an injury designation this week, but from all reports from the Seahawks say that he's still dealing with that injury. He hasn't quite been at 100%. And last time out, we saw Dallas get some carries. We saw Travis Homer get some usage. We saw Penny get some usage out there as well. So they're using 4 running backs, when they're all healthy. So it's not a great situation, but he's being completely unowned. It's a decent matchup against the Packers. And if they're going to get behind, if they're going to go to a pass-heavy approach, we know they're going to use DJ Dallas. He's by far the best blocker out of that backfield. Also the best in terms of pass-catching ability. He can actually run routes and whatnot. Let's move on to wide receiver now. Go ahead and bring this up on my end and share my screen. Perfect. All right, so now we're on to wide receiver. And by the way, apologize about the formatting there. It's off by a couple lines. Anyone on Patreon, I will fix that as soon as we get off of here. Wide receiver should be all set, though. Let's hop into the targets here. So you can see I have a lot more of these top-end targets picked here. A lot of that comes down to the value at running back. If we're able to take 2 of those options down low, going to be able to spend up at wide receiver, especially if we take somebody like a Mason Rudolph at quarterback. We could probably fit in 2 or even 3 of these stud wide receivers. So at the top of the board, we have Devontae Adams. I do expect this Seahawks game to be relatively competitive. So at a nearly a 25-point projection, I don't think you can go wrong there. Justin Jefferson in this high-scoring shootout between the Chargers and the Vikings, also like targeting that. Terry McLaurin is a great buyback for some of those Tom Brady stacks. Chris Godwin, we already talked about his usage, going to be a bell cow back with, wide receiver with Antonio Brown out, with Rob Gronkowski out as well. Keenan Allen, I expected him to come in with higher ownership, right? So you guys can see him here, 19% ownership. It's a good price tag. He's projected for one of the highest floors on the entire slate. So that's why he's still marked down as a yes. You can see he's one of the higher owned wide receivers on the slate, but I expected him to come in higher. He's had such a good season to this point, very good in terms of PPR production, scored plenty of touchdowns, and now gets one of the best matchups of the entire year. So I think that's a smash spot. Mike Evans, just like Chris Godwin, is a great play. Deontay Johnson should be like 30-40% owned, but he's not going to be one of the best plays on the slate. Without Chase Claypool, you're looking at a true 14, maybe even a 15 target ceiling for Deontay Johnson. True 35, 40-point fantasy ceilings, that kind of thing. It's not great weather. I think that's why the ownership's there only at 15%. But Mason Rudolph, he went to school over there at Oklahoma State, dealt with tons of windy conditions, cold conditions, and had one of the best seasons ever as a quarterback in college. I actually had the privilege of seeing him torched the Pitt Panthers up when I was at college. It was a very windy, it was a very snowy day over in winter. He threw for 63 points. He threw 8 touchdowns. I'm not saying that's going to happen today, but the guy can play in windy, cold conditions. I've seen it myself in person before. It's actually why I'm excited that he's starting for the Steelers. I think he's going to have a much better performance than Ben's had. The guy's a much better passer. He's much more accurate. He's more mobile. He makes faster decisions. I think in every facet of his game, other than the clutch factor, and that's a key one, right? In the playoffs, you obviously want Big Ben as your quarterback. But for regular season performances, I do think that Mason Rudolph is a more efficient quarterback for the Steelers. So for whatever that's said, we'll see that today. Even in those windy conditions, I like somebody like a Deontay Johnson. I like going to somebody like a Pat Freiermuth potentially. And we'll get down to some of the other wide receivers for the Steelers, but James Washington, McLeod, Cody White, those kind of guys could definitely be in play today. Mike Williams, completely underpriced. I expected him to come in about 25, even 30% owned. This is a smash spot for me. One of the spots I'm getting the highest leverage on the slate. One of the highest over-unders on the slate. This guy's had some ceiling performances, particularly towards the beginning of the year as well. So I definitely think he can go there. Chase Claypool, it needs to be a 0. Didn't update that for him being out. Yeah, he got marked out last night. Unfortunately, not going to be playing for the Steelers. Let's talk about a few of these other options here, though. DJ Moore, he's all right. He's just a little bit chalky, right? So DJ Moore at $6,300. I just wish he was single-digit owned, right? This guy hasn't had a great year. He's had 1 or 2 good games. It's a good situation against his Arizona Cardinals defense. Obviously, should be a relatively high-scoring game, particularly if Kyler Murray plays. But that type of ownership, he's not going to be fitting into my pool. Amari Cooper at 4.18% ownership, I do not understand. He's definitely going to make my player pool. Antonio Brown and Ridley, we knew are out. Assume that they're at 0. Had him in for minimal amounts of ownership just because of the last run that we had. But they were siding towards out. So that's why they had minimal to begin with. Devontae Smith there at $5,900. I don't love it, right? This is an offense that has been hugely run dependent of late. When Miles Sanders came out of the lineup, who was by far their best running back, all of a sudden they decided to run the ball more. Makes no sense to me. They haven't even been efficient doing so. They've gotten some wins because they've been efficient enough. But before Miles Sanders left, they were running the ball at nearly twice the clip in terms of efficiency. And they ran the ball about a fourth of the time. I don't get that at all. So in that type of scenario, obviously there's wide receivers. Even Jalen Hurts at quarterback gets a little bit of a downgrade. So not one of my favorite plays on this slate. Emmanuel Sanders seems very much so underpriced, also being overlooked like I'm there. Christian Kirk is a little bit higher owned than I'd like, but AJ Green could be out. DeAndre Hopkins could be out as well. So Christian Kirk, if that were to happen, would become one of the best plays at wide receiver. You see these options here. Jarvis Landry, Cole Beasley, they're going to get their targets. They're good in PPR. You can target them. Jacoby Myers, same kind of thing. Guy is going to catch you a ton of balls. Unfortunately, just never catches touchdowns. It's almost comical at this point. The guy hasn't had a touchdown in his career. I believe that's still the case. I knew it was the case for the first 6-7 weeks of the season, unless he caught one last week. Jacoby Myers still has 0 touchdowns in the NFL, which is just Bonkers. Rondell Moore there at $4,400. I like going to him, particularly if Hopkins or Green sits. Somebody who's extremely efficient with his targets. So if he ends up getting more targets because of the injury situation, makes him a very high ceiling play. James Washington, we already talked about. He went to college with Mason Rudolph. He caught 4 of those touchdowns that day when Pitt got absolutely demolished. You could definitely go there. James Washington's a deep play threat as well. So I think at 1.5% ownership, again, this trivial. You can just put him in 5 or 6 of your 150 lineups and get some leverage. Marcus Valdez-Scantling, I believe he's active. We'll have to double check on that, but 0.22% ownership. This guy's going to be targeted by Aaron Rodgers a crap ton. You're dealing with a bunch of guys out for that team. Robert Tonyan out for the year. So in the red zone, he's really the number one option other than Davante Adams. Davante Adams going to get a ton of coverage, but if they leave him one-on-one, this is the guy who's going to get that fade route. So I like going to him to get some red zone upside, particularly with Robert Tonyan out of the lineup. KJ Osborne, he's a good value option in that shootout affair. Tyler Johnson, he's going to be playing wide receiver 3 for this team. $3,300, you could do a whole lot worse. And then, of course, Ray McLeod III, going to be playing wide receiver 3, potentially even wide receiver 2 for the Steelers this week. You could go there as well. Let's move on to tight end now. So let me go ahead and get that all set on my end. All right, share screen. And tight end's interesting. We have a lot lower pricing at tight end than we've seen all year. So you guys can see the highest priced player here being Kyle Pitts at $5,800. Typically, we have someone like Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, that kind of thing on the slate. Both of them are playing tonight, though. So not going to have to worry about those price tags. It's all the mid-tier, all the value options here. So we'll go through our favorite options. First and foremost, Dalton Schultz. He's in a good bounce back spot against this Falcons team. Obviously, we have Blake Jarwin, who's out. Dalton Schultz didn't really do anything last week. But the fact is, no one on that team did anything. So I'm not going to hold that against him. He's seemingly in a great spot there. Dallas Goedert as well, not dealing with Zach Ertz in the lineup anymore. It's a all right matchup against this Broncos team. But again, it more comes down to the circumstance there, the opportunity there, more than the past performance. Dawson Knox finally getting healthy. It's a good matchup against the Jets. Very good target with Josh Allen at stacks. Noah Fant, he's expected to play at this point. We have to make sure that he was dealing with an injury last week. Good matchup against this Eagles team. He's always a home run play threat, so you like that. Ricky Seals-Jones against the Buccaneers. You like going there because he gets a ton of targets. Logan Thomas is still going to be out. Also a good buyback option for some of those Tom Brady stacks. Tyler Conklin, good cheap option if you're targeting that super high total game, that shootout between the Chargers and the Vikings. Jared Cook, great for your Justin Herbert stacks if you end up using them. I obviously don't have Justin Herbert stacks in my pool as of right now, but Jared Cook, a solid one-off option. He was last week as well. The guy is just always underpriced. Last week, he was $2,500. Week before that, he was like $2,300. Actually, no, I believe he's $2,500. That's the minimum was $2,000, but he was never that cheap. Either way, though, this guy's always underpriced. Do not understand it. The algorithm never catches up to him, and he catches a ton of touchdowns. Melody Cox at $3,100. Great matchup against the Jaguars team. If I'm using Carson Wentz, I don't hate using him as a one-off stack. Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, you're going to have to guess which one of them catches a touchdown today. Obviously, no Rob Gronkowski. And Gerald Everett, do not understand the price tag there at $2,600. It's a good matchup against this Packers team. He's been relatively effective, even with Geno Smith at the helm, so I don't think that's a horrible situation. In my pure flyer of the week, which I have no idea if it's going to make my pool, probably will, Donald Parham Jr., so just like Jared Cook, he plays for the Chargers team. It's a high upside offense. He's just more athletic, right? He's going to be getting more yards after the catch, so perhaps he ends up scoring a big touchdown. Let's move on to our defenses and wrap it up here, guys. Defense is I don't know. It's just very average this week. Not really much to say about it. We'll talk about some of our targets, though. Sharing my screen here for you guys. There you go. All right, let's go into defense. So you can see it's obviously a smaller slate. We don't have quite as many targets at defense. Steelers at the top of the board are never a bad option. You're never going to hear me talk bad about the Steelers, obviously, but there's going to be snow today. You're playing against one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Jared Goff is a turnover machine, particularly at offense. They fumble more than any other team in the NFL. You could go there. The Bills against the Jets. Anytime you have the dumpster fire that is the Jets, you can always target them from a defensive side. Patriots against the Cleveland Browns. I expect this to be a relatively low-scoring game. Like I mentioned before, the Patriots have to win this game. It's extremely important to them. People are underselling that fact. The Patriots are actually good this year. I was telling my stepdad's a huge Patriots fan. I was like, I think the Patriots are going to be good this year. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're full of shit, blah, 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 blah. They lost all these people. And I'm just like, it's Bill Belichick. The guy knows how to get it done. And that's been the case. It's just intangible. The guy's the greatest coach of all time. There's no doubt in my mind about that. There's like tiers to this, right? There's Bill Belichick at the top. And then there's all the Hall of Fame coaches, like 15 to 20 feet below him in terms of talent level. He's just that much better than everyone else. So I like targeting that defense. You know, if they end up getting a touchdown, that kind of thing would obviously end up being optimal. Saints defense at $3,100. This Tennessee Titans offense is a little bit overrated, in my opinion. Obviously, Ryan Tannehill struggled to start the year, had one good performance, and now everyone wants to forgive them. Don't last me forget, Derrick Henry's hurt for the year. You're not going to have that running game. Hell, they're using Adrian Peterson at running back, guys. Saints are a good option at defense. Browns defense, if we're expecting that to be a low-scoring game, I mean, the Browns have been pretty stout on defense for the entire year. Perhaps they go out, they get a pick six of somebody like Mac Jones. I like going there. Eagles defense has not been good to this point of the year, but they're super cheap. They're also playing this Broncos team, which is definitely turnover prone. You have Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, who is average at the very best. Then that rest of the offense is very young. So more of a target, you know, going against that offense more than anything. Also the price tag. Titans defense, they've scored a ton on defense. They just get a lot of picks. They've scored touchdowns. It's extremely volatile. That's not a predictor of future success. Anytime you see that on defense, it's just an extremely volatile position. I just like the matchup, right? The Saints are dealing with a quarterback I was going to call him a rookie quarterback. He's not a rookie quarterback. He just has very little experience at quarterback. Also without Alvin Kamara. And then finally, guys, the last defense I'm really considering, you know, some of these blanks I might end up fitting into my lineups, but the last defense I'll be relying on is going to be this Panthers defense. Obviously, matching up against the Arizona Cardinals, they're $2,400. You like the price tag there. Kyler Murray might end up sitting, and that's really what it comes down to. If Kyler Murray's out of the lineup, we have Colt McCoy at quarterback. I do not expect them to replicate what they did last week. McCoy looked all right. You know, he didn't really have to do much. James Conner just absolutely went off. And this Panthers defense is a lot more skilled than the defense they had to play against last week. So I definitely think that their defense I'll be using this week. So now that we've gone through all the projections, we'll go ahead and wrap this up with a cash build on DraftKings. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the lineup builder here. And while I do so, I'll remind you guys, if you guys are watching this on replay, and you have any questions before lock, anything like that, you can go ahead and put them down in the chat. If you guys are watching this live and you have any questions, also feel free to go ahead and put them down in chat. I'll answer them right here live for you guys, everything like that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's go into a cash build here for you guys, and let's hop on out of here after. So this is going to be our cash build for today. So I could obviously go through GPP builds, but that would take us all day. At GPPs, you're looking to just get leverage on the guys that you like, obviously fade some of the people that are a little bit too highly owned for you. That would take way too long. So let's go through a cash lineup. Let's just go through our foundational plays for the slate. So at quarterback, a lot of people in cash are going to be tempted to go to somebody like a Mason Rudolph, and I think that's a mistake, right? At quarterback, like I mentioned before, these stud options have just much higher ceilings than somebody like a Mason Rudolph, and we can get our value elsewhere. So to start off at the quarterback position, I think the guy with the highest floor, it's not even close here, is going to be Tom Brady. The guy has been stellar this year, #1 fantasy quarterback. He's also had hardly any bad performances, so I think he's a really solid option. And particularly because if we use him in a stack, we know that these top-end options are going to get targets. You know, no Antonio Brown, no Rob Gronkowski. We can really count on this stack to get it done, and that's why it's the best cash lineup for this week. You see, for me, it's probably going to be Mike Evans. He's a little bit cheaper than somebody like a Chris Godwin, also not dealing with any injury there. And if you wanted to stack it up twice, we could. I'd probably go to a Tyler Johnson, but I don't think it's necessary. So let's go back to running back now. As promised, we can go to some of those value options down here. So first and foremost, let's go to Mark Ingram, and then let's also go ahead and put Dearness Johnson in. There you are, bud. We're going to use both of these options at running back because, I mean, anytime you're in cash, guys, you want to eat the chalk. You want to be playing the guys that just make tons of sense. Not only are you getting the best median projection on the slate when you guys go ahead and do so, you're also mitigating your risk. Anytime that you're in a cash game, having higher ownership, particularly somebody that's almost a lock, is a best case scenario. You want to be dealing with as little positions as possible to go ahead and beat your opponents. And if everybody's playing one guy, you only have to beat them at the other 8, 9 positions, that kind of thing. So it's actually advantageous to play the chalk over here in cash games. So that's why we have them both in there. Let's go to wide receiver now. So now that we have some salary to spend, we only have $5,000 remaining per position, but defense is obviously going to improve that. Tight end as well. We can take some pretty expensive wide receivers here. So we're going to go to just our highest projected players. Deontay Johnson is our highest projected wide receiver on the slate. Projected for over 12 targets. Obviously, no Chase Claypool, no Juju Smith-Schuster. Just going to get a ton of targets. So even though it's a relatively low scoring game, I do expect him to get by with a lot of that PPR production. So now that we took a guy in that $6,000 range, we could probably take somebody a little bit more expensive. So we can consider spending the whole way up for Devontae Adams. That's going to limit us a little bit at our last few positions. So how about we hold off on that? Let's see exactly how much salary we're going to end up with. So we're going to go to defense. A lot of times when I'm playing cash defenses, I'm trying to take a real cheap one because at these other positions, you're going to get a bulk of your points from your wide receivers, from your running backs, from your quarterback. The points that you get from your defense are not going to make the difference. I mean, sure, you might end up having a defense that scores 20 points by some luck, but in cash games, that's usually not a huge factor. So a cheap option I like going to is the Panthers team, right? So we already talked about the fact that Kyler Murray might end up being out. They're also the cheapest defense I have in my pool. It's really a no-brainer there for me to go there. Let's go to tight end now. Let's get an idea of how much salary we're going to end up with here. So tight end, I do think that we can go to one of these mid-tier options. Somebody with a high ceiling. So for me, Dalton Schultz, Dallas Goedert are the number one options for that. Schultz, especially with like Jarwin out, Goedert without any more Zach Ertz. So for me, we're going to go to Dalton Schultz. I think he just has a huge floor here. Now we just have two positions left with $6,000. So we can still be relatively balanced. Which I really like doing when we're having a cash build here. So let's go to wide receiver. Let's try to take somebody in the $6,000 range. Amari Cooper would be a great option there. He's much better than Devonta Smith, Marvin Jones Jr. down here. Relatively huge jump up in talent from these two price ranges. DJ Moore, also a really solid option there. The only reason we're not playing him in GPPs is just because of the ownership. But again, we're playing cash. He's probably going to end up even more chalky, and that's actually a good thing there. But then we also have Michael Pittman Jr. here, who Hilton is playing, so he's not going to be getting quite the target boost as he had over the last few weeks, which is still project well. We're going to end up going with DJ Moore. So obviously DJ Moore going to be chalky. He's cheaper than he should be. Decent matchup against this Cardinals team. I think he's a slam dunk pick there. And now we have our flex spot, guys. So we have $5,800. Our goal here is just to take the guy with the highest median projection. And for me, damn, I wish we had an extra couple $100 because we did. Yeah, we got to get Leonard Fournette. So how about we do that? How about we take Moore out of there? Moore's the guy I feel the least convicted about. Let's go over here to flex and let's put in Leonard Fournette because actually, yeah, I'm fine with that because I would normally say in a GPP, right, you wouldn't want to have Tom Brady with a wide receiver and a running back, but this is going to be a super high scoring game. This is cash. We're just looking for a relatively high median projection. And it's not that type of negative correlation isn't going to make a massive difference. So now we know we have $6,000 remaining. And here's the problem, right, guys? So when you're building, you're going to run into this problem. Now we're shut off of, Amari Cooper. We're dealing with the guys that are just in that bottom range in terms of wide receiver. So that's not going to work. We're going to have to finagle this a little bit. And I'm glad we're doing this here on stream so we can show you guys how this works. So if that's going to be the case, we're probably going to have to spend down at flex a little bit, right? We don't want to hamper ourselves at wide receiver. These guys in this range, they're a clear step behind these guys in the $6,000 range. So DJ Moore would have been a clear target. We could spend up even more if we wanted to, just because we're going to spend down at flex. Mike Williams makes a lot of sense. We're going to go to Mike Williams. He's just severely underpriced there, in my opinion. So now we have $5,500 for flex, which is going to take us out of that mid-tier range. Going to give us, obviously, similar type players, just at a better price tag. Let's see. Probably Antonio Gibson. So we're dealing with median projection here. I'm just trying to make sure. So he's a buyback, right? The issue with, sorry guys, one thing. I have acid reflux right now. It's getting me a little bit, but we're good now. That helped. Antonio Gibson, right? So he's $5,500. He's a buyback for that Tampa Bay stack. And cash, probably not the best idea. We're looking for a median projection. We're not necessarily looking for that high-end upside, but if we take a look at median projection, it's not because of the correlation that we took Antonio Gibson. He has the highest median projection here. I am projected right now for 14.1 points. Other guys in this range, Jeremy Nichols, he's like 8 points. I have Hawkinson in the 12 to 13 point range. Kirk's right around 13, 14 points. So going to somebody like Antonio Gibson, we know he's going to get touches. He's a running back. He's not dealing with that target volatility that somebody like a Kirk or a Hawkinson gets. So he's going to get his yardage a little bit more consistently. So I think in terms of a cash lineup, this is the perfect build. I'm definitely going to be entering this lineup for this weekend. Again, Tom Brady is giving you one of the highest floors at quarterback. You're also getting those two really good options at running back at value. And then we're taking just solid floor options the whole way around, right? You can't really poke a hole into any of these plays. The only play that we're not super thrilled about in this lineup is Antonio Gibson, and we can live with that. We know he's going to get his touches. He's a buyback for that stack. And overall, I think a really great play. So thank you guys for stopping by. As always, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. I have to get over to the Steelers. We're going to watch the Steelers all together, my family, some friends, that kind of thing. So getting out of here a little early to get to that. But good luck with all of your lineups. If you guys have any questions, if you're watching this on replay or you're watching this live and you have any questions, go ahead and let me know, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. But